Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to our show, Ask the Imam. We hope your Ramadan fasting is going well and you're enjoying this holy month in its true spirit. It's our pleasure to have you again on our live stream, and we appreciate you tuning in to ask the questions which will help young Muslims of today in understanding Islam according to modern times. And Sheikh Ibrahim Hussain will enlighten us in how to approach Islam in these unprecedented times. Please send us your questions on our live stream. We will definitely answer any questions you may have through our live Facebook and YouTube session, inshallah. If you are concerned about maintaining your anonymity, please DM us your question and we'll definitely respond to that as well. Also, please subscribe to our show and share this live stream with your friends and family so we can maximize the benefits from the answers which will be provided by our Imam. Now let's move on with our show, and allow me to introduce you to our Imam, Sheikh Ibrahim Hussain. And Sheikh Ibrahim Hussain is an Islamic scholar and Qadi who was born in Blackburn, UK. At the age of 10, he began performing Qiraat and Naat at mosques and events and quickly gained popularity in his community. Humbled by the impact that he had on his family and peers, he knew he had a gift and pursued the memorization of the Holy Quran, which he achieved by the age of 15. He then later completed Dars-e-Nizami and gained specialist ijazas to teach the Islamic sciences. Mr. Hussain is currently residing in Toronto, where he serves as a Qadi and Imam. For the past 9 years, he's traveled globally to participate in Islamic and interfaith conferences. He graduated in leadership development from the said business school at the University of Oxford and is the founder of Quran Club Toronto, a madrasa and Muslim youth club. His father and spiritual guide, Sheikh Imtiaz Hussain Chishti, is founder of the Holy and Noble Quran Society, and that's what inspired him to become a Qadi. So that was the introduction for our Imam for today's show. And now let's move on to introducing our young guests today, who have a bright future ahead of them, inshallah. First guest I have is Abhiyan Khan from Manchester, United Kingdom. He will be Sheikh Ibrahim's new student, and who will also be asking further questions. Taha Asfar from Brampton, Ontario, who is a student of 10th High School. Arif Usmani from Markham, Ontario, who is a student of economics at York University. How are you all today?
We're good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
So let's move on with our show, and let's let Taha ask the first question. Taha, you may go ahead with your first question.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Saab. My first question for you was basically young Muslims are increasingly becoming victims of mental health issues caused due to increased stress, studious pressures, and it's tough for like peer pressure. They lack self-confidence. One thing that I wanted to ask, how would you define mental health in the perspective of Islam, and how real is it, and how big of a challenge is it for young millennials, Muslims of today, and how does Islam advise us to challenge this?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Taha, for your question. This is a very important question. With regards to mental health, this is something that has always, existed as an issue from the existence of the human race, and it's something that has always been there. That being said, in today's day and age, there's definitely more awareness with regards to mental health, and people are actually even becoming more and more aware of certain mental health issues that they have. And I think when we were younger, I remember back 15 or 20 years ago, the reality was that there wasn't much discussion around mental health, and people were just also labeled people who had any issues. They were kind of targeted, or they were disrespected, and they were not helped. Whereas nowadays, there's an increased amount of awareness and support available for victims of mental health. And when we look at the Holy Quran, for example, there are a lot of verses in the Quran that can really help guide us in improving and in strengthening our mental health. Specifically, the Holy Quran has mentioned that the Quran is shifa, is a means of cure. So the recitation of the Quran, even listening to the recitation of the Quran, can provide a lot of tranquility and peace and harmony. And also, that being said, when we look at a few other verses of the Quran, Allah has described the Quran, and Allah has described His remembrance as being something that provides tranquility to the heart, and which helps us, obviously improve our mental health. And that goes without saying that meditation, obviously, just like the recitation of the Quran, meditation helps with with combating mental health, with dealing with mental health. And in addition to that, obviously, being in a positive mindset, that helps as well. And when we look at, a lot of the times nowadays, there's a lot of negativity. And I don't know if you've heard of the concept of cognitive behavior therapy. We look at the Quran really has given us a lot of, I would say, into supplementation, and the Quran has given a lot of information and education with regards to how we can deal with our mental health, how important it is to look after our mental health. And there are a lot of advices there. When we look at the life of the Prophet as well, we look at the hadith, there's a lot of advices with regards to that as well. But I just want to also mention here that 10-15 years ago, or even before that, people who did suffer from mental health, they were definitely looked down upon. Whereas nowadays, I think, because of the awareness of mental health in general, we have become a bit more compassionate and a bit more sensitive to people who have mental health. Just for example, people who have autism. I myself, have taught students who used to attend our madrasa, and they were very, very bright students. Yet, they had some issues and some challenges. And like every one of us, we have our own challenges. But what I've noticed now is that, in general, we are becoming a bit more respectful and a bit more cautious and a bit more aware of people who do have issues. And the reality is that some people, have realized after decades, that what issues they actually have. So I think mental health is something that is continuously being developed upon. And this is something to not be ashamed of. If someone does feel that they are going through, we all go through depression, in parts of our life. That's something natural. Obviously, we all go through stress and anxiety and peer pressure. So it's absolutely normal for us to be having conversations around our mental health. And it is important that we should always be able to confidently voice, our concerns, and voice what we feel and how we feel, because that's the only way we can actually, look after ourselves and treat ourselves.
MashaAllah. Very well put. This is indeed a very complex subject, and it's actually much more complicated than what it seems. But mental health is real, and good answer by Sheikh Saab. And hope the young Muslims can understand that what it means and how we should go about it. And now let's move on to the second question that is coming from our guest in Manchester, UK, Mr. Abiyan. So Abiyan, you can go ahead with the next question.
Assalamu alaikum and Ramzan Mubarak. My question is that mental health isn't openly discussed in Muslim and minority groups. Do you think Islamophobia could be a reason for that?
So, to be very academically honest, and in general, to be very clear and transparent with regards to answering your question, I personally do not think Islamophobia has anything to do with how, as a community, as a Muslim community, we deal with the challenges of mental health in our community. And the reality is that even we have to go back culturally, and we have to go back and we have to really understand that mental health is an issue that has been has always been there as an issue. And that being said, we have our own challenges as a community, and like every other community has their own challenges. We are obviously now learning more and more about mental health, and we're also learning more about the effects of mental health. And I feel that we are now learning more, just like everyone else is learning more and becoming more aware and more I would say receptive and more accepting of mental health in our community. We're just learning more and more about mental health. And the reality is that when we look at now, we have social media, and there's actually a pressure that's associated with social media as well, because nowadays, life is not as easy as it used to be, where now, it's like we're living different lives, and we're monitoring and managing how we look and how we look in the public eye in so many different uh, platforms, and that obviously comes with its own challenges. We have to look a certain way on LinkedIn, for example. On Instagram, we have to look a certain way. On Facebook, we have to obviously look in, have a certain profile, etc., etc. So all this comes with its own challenges. So I would definitely say that Islamophobia is not really an issue with when it comes to when we as a Muslim community are dealing with mental health. Obviously, when we look at the mosques, I believe that the mosques have a big role to play, and even we have to understand that not every imam, for example, is a psychotherapist. You have to understand that not every imam is trained in providing pastoral care. I was fortunate to serve as a chaplain, and I'm still a registered chaplain, locum chaplain with the NHS in the UK, although I live in Canada, and I've served the NHS for over 12 years. And also I was fortunate to also be a chaplain here in Canada for Halton Healthcare, an on-call imam. So not every imam has the training to obviously deal with mental health issues, and a lot of the times imams or leaders, they are not able to provide that support base. But I think nowadays, I know a lot of my friends who are imams and who are ulama, who are now working as psychotherapists, and they are helping the community. And so now we do have a lot of our Muslim brothers and sisters, professionals, health professionals, who are able to now, not only help Muslims, but who are working in hospitals, who are working as psychotherapists. And there's also organizations, alhamdulillah. For example, in the GTA, we have an organization known as the Khalil Center that helps young Muslims and Muslims in general with regards to dealing with their mental health. And there are other organizations as well. Obviously, there are mainstream organizations as well. I'm just noticing that now there's an increase of help available for mental health. And I also know that the government as well recently announced, even right now for the pandemic, they are funding, organizations who are going to be helping with, dealing with, mental health, etc., etc. I've also obviously visited hospitals in the UK, and I've been to the mental health wards, and I've met, patients, mental health patients, etc., etc. So in general, this is a global issue. This is an issue that we are all dealing with. Every single community is dealing with this issue. So I think this is something that we have to accept. And I don't think Islamophobia is an issue in this regard. We as a community, I believe, have to talk about mental health in the mosques. We have to talk about this during the khutbahs, and we have to bring mental health experts into the mosques, and we have to organize workshops, and we have to obviously have helplines there that are available 24/7 for our Muslim youth, where we have an expert who is paid, who can really guide our youth. I think that's the way where we need to go as a community.
Thank you again, Sheikh Saab. That was a very detailed and thorough answer, very well informed. And we just came to know about your background with NHS and the Halton Health. So one more reason to be honored by your presence here. And thank you again. So we just have a live question here from Sharif Khan, who is from Karachi, Pakistan. And he's asking that according to Islam, if we won't pray 3 Jummah prayers consecutively, so we have to recite the kalima again. So can you please elaborate what is the order for that in the current ongoing situation?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm sure a lot of us Muslims would have thought about this hadith, because when we were younger, whenever you learned this hadith or we heard this hadith, we always used to make sure that we would never miss, 3 Jummahs consecutively. The answer to that is that because of the current situation where, we, for the sake of, saving lives and for preserving lives and saving the lives of our fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, we are not allowed to go to the mosque and pray Jummah in congregation. And because we're praying Dhuhr, which is obviously, as we know, an alternative, and which is supplementing, obviously, not just supplementing, but replacing the Jummah. Therefore, one does not have to repeat the kalima, one does not become a munafiq. because although there is this hadith and this prophetic saying, but we also have the verse of the Quran where Allah said that whoever saves one life has saved the life of the whole of humanity. So therefore this verse of the Holy Quran obviously teaches us that we have to prioritize this verse over that hadith now, and that hadith is really, that hadith applies to a situation where someone is purposely and deliberately not praying Jummah when Jummah is taking place in mosques and misses 3 Jummahs. Then that rule would apply to that person in that scenario. The scenario that we are currently in right now, that does not apply to us.
Thank you, Sheikh Sab. That was indeed a very reassuring message. And this is just a reminder for everyone, if you're watching our live stream, if you have any questions, please send them over to the live stream. We will definitely answer those questions on our show. You can ask them through the live Facebook and live YouTube session. And now let's move on towards the third question, and that will be coming from Arib, who is from Markham, Ontario, and he is a student of economics at York University. Arib, go ahead, please.
Assalamualaikum. So my question is a bit longer. So basically, young Muslims of today, especially in the West, spend most of their time in colleges or universities where they interact.
Arib, I'm sorry, I think your voice is a little muffled there, so there might be a technical issue. For our viewers, if you can just kind of check if your microphone settings and everything is okay.
Let me try it again. Is this better? Is this a bit better?
It's
Take out your headphones.
muffled, yeah. Looks like there's
Is it working? It's not working.
Oh, sorry to our viewers. Looks like there was another technical issue here. So, well, still, let's move on with the show. And the next question, actually, this was the one which we couldn't answer yesterday. It was in our pending questions. And let me go ahead and ask. A user actually asked that how should young Muslims tackle the topic of Islamophobia? Like young Muslims today, especially in the West, spend most of their time in colleges and universities where they interact a lot with each other. And there's a lot of vitriol coming from opposing groups who make a lot of Islamophobic statements under the disguise and context of freedom of expression. And in the light of Islam, what is the best course of action to make sure Muslims engage in a healthy debate and dismantle Islamophobia at the same time? Sheikh Saab, if you can address this, please.
Okay, thanks again for your question. When we look at the Holy Quran, there's a verse where Allah Almighty guides us to how we should respond when someone portrays evil sentiments towards us. And that is when Allah said that how we must repel evil by goodness. And that's why if someone does obviously initiate a conversation, or if someone does spread hatred, or if someone is making condescending or disrespectful remarks towards our religion, firstly, we must understand that we must have the ability and the capacity to be able to, respectfully, listen to what the other person is saying. And then when that person is finished saying what they have to say, we should be able to obviously respond to them in a respectful manner. Just like our Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, when he used to address, people who were obviously, disrespecting him, he used to address them with the utmost respect. So that is something that we have to do. I think one thing I would like to also mention here is that even online, for example, the best way to obviously deal with this is, a lot of the times the best way is to avoid actually, one should really avoid getting into debates or discussions, especially when one side, or one group, or one person is being a bit too disrespectful. The best way would be to just kind of block those comments, if one can. But if for some reason there are comments full of hatred and etc., one obviously should focus on being objective and focus on obviously answering and addressing the issues, without then obviously attacking that individual per se, but the focus needs to be correcting and combating the negativity, and focusing on educating that person. So we as educate, and remember, when we're educating someone, we can only educate someone when we educate them through love and compassion, and through obviously a respectful discourse. That being said, currently in our current situation with the pandemic, I must say that the whole world right now has definitely become more receptive and more open to people of different faith groups. Especially, for example, when we look in the UK, and the first group of doctors who were martyred, who passed away after contracting COVID-19, who were in the front line, were actually Muslim doctors. And also, right now, we have so many Muslims who are currently still serving on the front line, to the extent where even the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Mr. Justin Trudeau, actually, when he wished us Ramadan Mubarak, he also acknowledged how many Muslims are working in the front line. And even, for example, you have the Honourable Matt Hancock of the UK, the Health Minister, also, when in his message of greeting the Muslim community for Ramadan, he also acknowledged this fact. So I think I'm very grateful to Allah Almighty that, Alhamdulillah, currently right now, people, obviously, the whole world is becoming more and more, caring and loving and compassionate. And I think the whole world is realizing that at the end of the day, we need to obviously focus on obviously living together as a community, because the reality is that Muslims have and continue and will continue to contribute towards society.
Thank you, Sheikh Sab, again for the politically informed answer. And before I move on to the next question with our guest students today, I have a couple of live comments here. So the first one we have to address is from Minhaj Siddiqui. He's from Karachi, Pakistan. And he's asking, is there any restriction while praying namaz that you should not do personal stuff like itching and anything else to create distraction in the namaz, etc.?
Okay, so it's a very good question. Thank you for asking the question. So obviously, when one is definitely praying in namaz, you should obviously work on, trying to not be distracted anyway whatsoever. But as we're human beings, it's natural sometimes. For example, if I'm reciting the Quran or I'm leading, maybe my beard is itching, so I can quickly just relieve myself of the discomfort that is allowed. The ulama said, and the fuqaha and the muftis have also taught us as well, the scholars have taught us that when we do, for example, itch, we should only, use one hand, for example, and do it quickly and go back to continue praying without any distractions. One thing that we definitely need to avoid is, that in the state of praying, for example, when we're standing in qiyam, that, both hands have been removed. And now, for example, we start taking our topi off and start, massaging or scratching our head. That is something known in the fiqhi istilah as amale kathir, because now we're doing something which is, too big, and that, some fuqaha have said that, that can go to the extent of even invalidating the salah. But a minor itching, obviously scratching is obviously okay. And so that is something that does not invalidate the salah if it's minor. And if it's something that is urgent, for example, sometimes what happens as well is we have some injuries as well sometimes that lead to one person having to scratch. But ideally, what we want to be doing is we want to remain as concentrated as possible in the salah.
Well, thank you, Sheikh Saab, and thank you, Manaj, for asking a candid question. So we welcome all questions here. You can feel free to ask any question that you have of that type, because young Muslims definitely have a lot of questions in their mind, and that's what this forum is about. So let's move on to the next live question that we have here from Fizza Zahra, and they're asking, what's the reason behind blowing on the shoulders after namaz? I think they mean by the, when we say assalamu alaikum towards the right and left side after finishing the salah. So maybe it's pertained to that. So what do you think of that, Sheikh Saab?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the sister is saying in terms of blowing on the shoulder. I think what she may mean is how sometimes some people, I've seen it when I was young as well. Some people, they put their hand on their back or something after salah, and they read some kind of tasbih or stuff like that. Some people I've seen, they put their hand on their head. I've seen that as
Possibly.
well. I think it's nothing. There's nothing wrong with that in terms of blowing. When for example, we make dua, we blow on ourselves. It's just try to get the blessings and the barakah. Yeah, it's not something first. It's not something that we have to do. It's something. I guess it's something which is if you want to do it, you can do it. And one thing that we do have to obviously just make sure is that after we are praying, we should always try to make as much dua as we can, because dua is the essence of worship. So that's all I'll say with regards to that.
And just to follow up with the question, it's on my personal level. So what I know about saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah on both sides of the shoulders after we finish the salah. So is that what we're addressing the angels or the farishtas on our right and left shoulder? Is that what we're doing there?
Yeah, definitely. We are exactly, that's what we are doing. So remember, we have kiram and katibin. So when we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and we are saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the angels as well. So yes, that is definitely correct.
All right. Thank you, Sheikh Saab. And let's move on to the next question that we have in our live queue. This is again from Sharif Khan in Karachi, Pakistan. And he's asking, due to this epidemic, maybe this year we won't be able to do an etikaf in masjid. So can a man do an etikaf at home? That's a good question. Sheikh Saab.
Yeah, so remember the Prophet ﷺ used to also perform etikaf in his, he used to perform etikaf, you used to go obviously and perform etikaf. It's an established sunnah in the month of Ramadan. One can definitely perform etikaf in their home. And how you could do that is, for example, in your own bedroom, for example, you could, just kind of, camp out in your bedroom, and you can obviously, your family members can give you the food and you can pray. At the same time though, one thing I would say here is that if your family members need you or need your help in any way whatsoever, then it would be better if you can actually help your family and help them, because if you do go into etikaf, then you may not be available, and that may put a bit of a burden on your family. And remember, right now, the situation we're in right now, even in our homes, we need to make sure that we're connecting. We talked about mental health at the beginning. We need to make sure that we're connecting with each family member right now, because now it's a time for us to be together, and we need to be, close knit and connected as much as we can, just to make sure that everyone is doing well, and we can be a support base for each other. But definitely, if someone can do etikaf, and if your family is not going to be affected, and if they everything is okay, if you definitely want to do etikaf, for sure you can do etikaf. Another thing I would like to mention is we already, like in the state, we can already make the niyat for etikaf right now. You should make the niyat because we are technically kind of in etikaf already, let's be honest. Unless obviously you have to go out for an emergency, but right now so that's something as well to think about. So you may not have to go into a formal etikaf. Already by staying home, we're already in a state of etikaf. So we should all make the niyyah. I'm glad you asked this question, because it reminds us that we should all make the niyat as well, that that we're in etikaf, and that way we can get the sawab for that as well. Just like when we go to the masjid, the scholars, they say that we should make the niyat of sunnat etikaf.
Well, thank you, Sheikh Saab, again. That was indeed an answer with a lot of practical suggestions, actually. And thank you, Sharif, for a great question. Let's move on to our next question that will be coming from our guest, student Arib Usmani. Arib, if your technical challenges are over, we may move ahead with our next question.
Hopefully you guys can hear me now.
Absolutely fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question was, the younger Muslim generations, studying in campuses are exposed to certain cultures and subcultures where they are susceptible to emotional attachments with, the opposite genders. So, this is resulting in increased premarital relationships and polygamy in the Muslim youth. So how would you advise them to, cope with this situation and, keep everything halal while still attending, campus classes?
Good question.
Thank you, Arib, for asking this question. Yeah, before when you, I think when you were talking before, it felt like you were in a space shuttle, but now I'm glad, we can finally hear you. Very important question. I'm not too sure if polygamy is going on in universities. Not something I'm aware of. Obviously, if it is, I mean that has its own challenges. But definitely, obviously, there's a big, obviously challenge right now for Muslim students at campuses. Obviously, there's a lot of, you know, um, obviously attractions, and there's distractions, and there's obviously relationships, and the question obviously was how can we address and how can we deal with this challenge and during being at university. So what I would say to that is that I think it's natural, again, like I said, to fall in love is something, it's natural. And to be attracted to someone is also natural. And if you do end up being attracted to someone in university or in high school, for example, think about it, and think that if this person is someone that you would like to get married to in the future, then it's something that you could discuss with them and try to kind of have a respectful relationship, which means where obviously you talk to each other, but you kind of obviously maintain the practices of the Sharia, and you do not engage in any activity which is unlawful. So that's something that you could do. At the same time, what one should obviously do is not to kind of, don't obviously become too close with someone if you know that you're not gonna, you don't want to get married, and you don't want to basically just kind of just be talking to someone without any purpose, for example. So for example, if you are talking to someone from the opposite gender with regards to some work at university, like an assignment, for example, or you're working together on a project, or for example you're revising together, you just want to maintain a professional a professional setting, just like you would do, for example, at work. That's very important to obviously maintain professionalism when you communicate with each other. I think that would be the best way. Now there are obviously even greater challenges. You obviously mentioned obviously being attracted to the opposite gender, which is obviously the normal way, but obviously right now we have other issues as well. And obviously with regards to attraction and how people are being attracted to people from the same gender, which is a big issue as well, that unfortunately does need to be addressed. And but the reality is that, again, what I would say is that we just have to make sure that we don't cross the line, and we must make sure that we follow the Sharia, and we don't basically engage in any unlawful activity. And we just have to remember, for example, the opposite, this girl that you're talking to, this sister that you're communicating with, at the end of the day, you have to look at it as, this could be your sister, and someone else, how would you like it if someone else was talking to her? So there's all these things. We have to obviously have empathy. We have to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And the most importantly, we just have to be respectful, because anything that we do or we say, we'll definitely be held accountable for that. And another thing I would like to mention here is that other than just in the universities, obviously with social media, with Instagram, with Snapchat, with WhatsApp, with all these platforms, we also need to make sure that we are being very respectful when we communicate with each other, because remember that everything is being kind of recorded as well. So we have to be very, very careful. And I think that the key thing to take away would be, and the key message that I would like to give, is that we have to just maintain professionalism when we communicate with each other. And if we do end up falling for someone, which is natural, then we can follow the teachings of Islam, which are very easy to follow, and we can follow the procedures and policies in place, and we can enter into a marital relationship. So we do have that option as well.
Well, thank you for the detailed answer, Sheikh Saab. This is indeed a very controversial subject, and I think that was the best possible answer that you gave. I think we do have some time constraints here, so before we move on, let's move on to our last question real quick here. And I would request Taha to ask the last question of the show today.
Yeah. So my question was, how do we keep practicing our faith despite all the distractions around? Like, how do we keep being good Muslims in this modern, globalized, and digitalized community where something like violence is only an online purchase away? And also, like, how do we keep the treasure of Islam while like learning how to move it on to our next generation?
Yeah, very good question. So again, coming back to the point is we have to be focused in life in general. We have to obviously be focused in life. We have to have a clear focus in terms of our career, in terms of how we want to obtain worldly success, and we need to obviously we want to also obviously obtain dini success, success of the hereafter. Because remember the verse in the Quran where Allah said, Allah taught us that we have to ask our Lord Allah for success in the dunya and the akhirah. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana. So that's important. The best way to balance that would be to have a clear focus and to obviously to always communicate with Allah through prayer. Uh, Through prayer, obviously, not just the 5 daily prayers and beyond that, but through dua as well. That's very important. Um, a lot of young Muslims, you know, think that Allah will not answer their prayers or Allah is not answering their prayers. But the reality is that Allah is always listening and there, and Allah is always there and available to listen to us, to the extent where sometimes we'll find ourselves in a situation where our own close friends will not want to listen to us or help us in any way whatsoever, but Allah is always there for us. And this beautiful saying that someone said that Allah heard you, just be patient. So what we need to do is develop the confidence that we should be able to communicate with Allah directly. We should be able to communicate with Allah, speak to Allah directly when we are supplicating. And that will give us the confidence to develop a strong relationship with Allah. And then what will happen is that we'll develop such a strong connection with Allah that when we have obtained some success, we'll be talking to Allah and we'll be saying, thank you, Allah. We need to develop this friendship with Allah. And likewise, vice versa, when we do something wrong, we'll be the ones reaching out to Allah first and saying, oh Allah, I did this and I'm very ashamed of this. Allah forgive me. You know what I mean? And for example, when we need something, when we are wanting to be successful in it for an exam, we want to pass an exam, or we want to obviously get a we have a job interview, for example, or we want to get married to a girl, etc., who we love. Then again, we need to be obviously supplicating to Allah. So I think the best thing for us, in order for us to have strong faith, and in order for us to remain steadfast on our faith, is that we need to always be supplicating to Allah. We need to always be communicating with Allah. And when we look at the prophets as well, we look at how they always communicated with Allah. Even our Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family and companions, he always communicated with Allah, and he taught us how we must always communicate with Allah. So a lot of the times what happens is that when we do not communicate with Allah, when we do not supplicate to Allah, we feel that we are alone and no one is going to help us, and that also weakens our mental health and our spiritual health, and our and how we can obviously work on developing our spiritual and mental health is knowing that Allah is someone who we can always communicate with.
Jazakallah. Thank you for your answer, Sheikh Saab. These are indeed going to help our young Muslims of today, and especially the guests who joined our show today. And we all know that you're mashallah, a very beautiful reciter of the Holy Quran. So let's end our today's show with a surah and translation from you. So, yeah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار صدق الله العظيم. This verse, I believe, also educates us and guides us how to work on strengthening and preserving and maintaining our mental health, and making sure that we are able to have a strong mental health and have a positive mindset, especially when Allah said that indeed the creation of the skies and the earth and the coming of the day and the night, in the coming of the day of the night and in the creation of the skies and the earth, there are signs for the people of intelligence. And then Allah describes the people of intelligence as those people who are constantly remembering Allah, standing, sitting, and lying down. And this is what I talked about earlier, that we should know, and we should have this realization that we can talk to Allah, we can do the dhikr of Allah, we can make dua to Allah, standing, sitting, lying down, driving on a bicycle, sitting down, literally lying down. This is what Allah is saying here, that the people of intelligence are those people who are always remembering Allah, standing, sitting, lying down, and they are contemplating on the creation of the skies and the earth. And the people of intelligence, they have this attitude where they say, "Oh, our Lord, you did not create anything without any benefit, without any purpose. You did not create anything with, you did not create anything without a purpose. And you did not create anything that is negative per se, or that is harmful. Allah created everything for a purpose. Even alcohol, for example, or drugs, for example, alcohol is allowed to be used as a medicine. Drugs are allowed to be used as medicine. So Allah created everything for a purpose. And then at the end of the verse, Allah again reminds us that we should have a positive attitude, and how we should always glorify Allah, and Allah is glorified, and Allah is the one who is pure. And we ask Allah that He forgives us from the hellfire. So this is how we can obviously learn to work on improving our mental health. So that's what I want to end with today.
Without a shadow of doubt. Thank you so much, Imam Sahib. And that was indeed a very great session. You did help a lot of our listeners today. And thanks a lot to the commenters who asked those questions in the live stream. We appreciate your questions, and we want to tell everyone that we will be here every weekend at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and hope we can get questions again from you on our next live stream, which will be next Saturday and Sunday, 5 p.m. again. And in the end, I would like to thank our guests, Mr. Taha, Arib, and Abhiyan. Thanks a lot, guys, for your questions, and hope that Imam Sheikh Ibrahim Hussain was able to answer your questions in the light of Islam in the best possible way. And thanks a lot for joining today.
Thank you for having us.
Meet up next show.
We'll see you next week.